will be sent to you after the event. So if you have any colleagues or contacts who would be interested in both of these programs, you can share the recording with them afterwards. We'll be uploading it to our YouTube. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome today's speaker. So my colleague, Dr. Karl Murphy. So Karl is an EU Affairs Officer at the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly. So as some of you will be aware, we have 3 regional assemblies in Ireland. So Karl works in the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly. He's been based there since September 2022. A key part of Karl's role sees him act as a national contact point for both the European Urban Initiative and URBACT programs in Ireland, so what he'll be speaking on today. Karl works with all local authorities, so lots of you may have been in contact with Karl already. So he helps you avail of both programs, calls and activities that fall under both of those programs. Karl is going to speak to us for about the next 45 to 50 minutes, and he's going to give you an overview of both of these programs, the opportunities and details of upcoming calls under both URBACT and EUI. So I'll hand the presentation over to you now, Karl. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anya, and good morning to everybody. Fine autumn day here today. Hopefully where you are as well. So to share my screen with you now. Okay, and from the start. Okay, so thanks very much for the introduction, Anya, and indeed to yourself, Lisa, and Lorraine, and all colleagues for the opportunity to speak to the ETC network today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak about both programs, their calls and their opportunities. So as Anya mentioned there, I'm European Union Affairs Officer at the Eastern Midlands Regional Assembly, but in today's, most pertinent to today is the national contact point role for those 2 sustainable urban development programs. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of what I'll look at today, what I'll speak about today, is the European Urban Initiative and URBACT, but I'll also speak a little bit about the Urban Agenda for the EU, which has a call open at the moment. So the Urban Agenda for the EU, another acronym, UAEU, is connected but separate to the EUI. So I'll just make that a little bit clearer later. But just to talk a little bit about the EUI, I'll be speaking about the Innovative Actions call, which is open at the moment, the capacity building calls. So one remains open continuously. One will open again in October. And then also some other items around knowledge capitalisation, for example, Portico, the urban matchmaker, and really to speak to the events and the knowledge capitalisation that the EUI programme engages in. I'll talk a little bit about what the Urban Agenda for the EU is, and in particular, the thematic partnerships which are open at the moment for a new call for 2. And also what is URBACT, so the different types of networks, the URBACT method, City Labs again, and its coverage in Ireland and opportunities to engage in the near future. So just a brief slide really on EMRA's appointment as contact points. So we were appointed last December 2023. Feels such a long time ago already. Things are moving very fast in the world of EUI. But we were appointed last December following nomination by the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And this is on the back of our reappointment as national URBACT point through to 2027. So the 2 programs do very much have complementarities. There is an opportunity to engage jointly, like I am today, in delivering this presentation on both programs, and really, targeting our audience in such a way as to kind of get maximum out of your time and being able to tell you about the 2 programs all at once. So again, both programs enable EMRA to support and work across the 3 regions and all our local authorities in the realm of sustainable urban development as well. So I think you'll agree by the end of today that there is something here for all our towns and all our cities to varying degrees, but both programs do have good coverage across our nation. So this slide is a little bit text heavy, so I'm not going to go and go through it all, but just to kind of note that during 2014 and 2020, there was 115 billion of cohesion funds was invested in cities. About 1/7 of that then was managed directly and implemented locally across 1,000 sustainable urban development strategies. So, real impact close as possible to the ground. And just to kind of tell you about the origins of the EUI, the European Urban Initiative, is previously you had what was called the UIA, which was the Urban Innovative Actions, and you also had a separate UDN, which was the Urban Development Network. And so in the first case, it was really just to help cities, give them support around experimenting and also innovation. And the Urban Development Network was to link those Article 7 cities, as they were called at the time, around communication, exchange of information. So an Article 7 city, or an Article 11 city, as we sometimes refer to them now, were those cities designated by the managing authorities of a member state around their commitment to sustainable urban development. So the EUI brings those two acronyms together. The UIA and the UDN come together, and again, you have this instead you have this one pot, so to speak, around fostering city-led innovation, and you have a budget of up to 450 million for the period through to 2027. I think that's been slightly revised more recently, but again, fostering city-led innovation, the sharing of urban knowledge, practice, and to further build capacity. So I'll talk a little bit later about URBACT again, and how that existed, of course, under the previous programming period, URBACT 3, and now we're in the URBACT 4 programming period as well, and that continues to work for our cities and towns in Ireland. It continues to be popular among our local authorities, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So just in terms of the EUI, I'll be touching upon these items. So I'll talk a little bit about innovative actions in a moment. I'll talk a little bit about the two types of capacity building and also the events as per capacity building here, knowledge capitalization, and ultimately we're interested in the final goal of sustainable urban development. And you have here in the background, you have the urban agenda for the EU, essentially informal cooperation, multi-level, multi-stakeholder between the Commission, member states, cities very much at the core, and as well as other umbrella organisations. But thematic partnerships, which I'll mention a little bit further on later, being one of the primary opportunities through the urban agenda for the EU. But the Commission, with the support, of course, and with the feeding in of the member states, very much keeping their ear to the ground in terms of what's arising as urban issues across the bloc. So on to innovative action. So this is where most of the EUI budget is aimed. It's targeted. So again, so what this is about really is essentially in terms of offering our local authorities, again in consultation with other delivery partners, the opportunity to engage in risky and innovative solutions to an urban challenge that they have. Okay. So up to 5 million euros ERDF, we'll get into the specifics actually in a moment, but up to 5 million euros ERDF is available for a project under the Urban Innovative Actions, under the Innovative Actions, EUI Innovative Actions. So just in terms of some of the important aspects or characteristics, let's say, of what an Innovative Actions project would look like. So it should be innovative. So this is the piece that there's about 30% of the marks going for this. So to be innovative, of course, is a challenge as always, and it's important to benchmark and sometimes working closely with the university sector and others to identify, I suppose, what is new. But just on that again, while the EUI is looking for projects that are new, they're bold, creative, experimental, so products, services, processes, they can be new, but they can also be an evolution of what's been there before. But of course, to be able to evolve some, of course, you need to also have done that bit of background work to see what has actually been created already at the EU level. So participatory as well. So while the local authority is typically the applicant here, it's also important to have a strong project partnership. So delivery partners would be also industry, civil service, academia. So consultation, coordination, and co-design, very much an important aspect of an EUI application. It should be measurable as well. So, for example, the relevant monitoring and evaluation activities should be there. So it should be clear on the changes that are expected through implementation. And in terms of being sustainable and scalable as well, can this be self-sufficient after the fact? So in terms of future ownership and funding resources, can it be scaled up? Can it be linked to local, regional strategies and policies? And then transferable as well. So this is interesting because unlike some of the other EU programs, including the one I'll mention later on, URBACT as well, you have a lot of exchange of good practice and partners learning from one another. But in the case of an Innovative Actions, much of the activity is at the local level. So the place in which you're situating it, most of the activity is happening there. But in addition to this, then at the end, there is the opportunity then to transfer this to 3 transfer partners outside of your country. So again, it should be replicable. This project should be replicable elsewhere. So the solutions, the outputs therein. So, you know, in essence, all of these characteristics are important, but also, of course, the project should be of good quality. It should be realistic, clear, logical work plan, and should be good value for money. So some of the items I mentioned there already, you know, approximately 350 million was available, so up to 5 million euros per project. So again, the maximum co-financing rate is 80%, so that's 20% own resources. So the beneficiaries are typically, and this is very EU speak, urban authorities, associations, or groupings of urban authorities. So in the Irish context, I suppose the boundary is very much the local authority. And again, I'll speak a little bit about eligibility in a moment, but typically the local authority is the applicant for these, and they should be urban or suburban. I'll talk, as I said, a little bit more about that in a moment, and they should have a minimum of 50,000 applicants. So in terms of the implementation period, you're talking about 3.5 years, and the thematics or the themes are decided each time by the European Commission in consultation with member states. So we had Call 1, New European Bauhaus, a couple of years ago. We had Call 2, which is well underway now, Greening Cities, Sustainable Tourism. And the current call remains open until October the 14th. So 90 million of the pot is available for up to 20 projects. As I say, 5 million potentially per project available. So again, that's up to 5 million, of course, as per the maths there. So just to flag on particular on Call 3 as well, on the Call 3 page, you'll be able to see lots of prompts and tips around what it would be innovative in the area of energy transition and technology in cities as well. So again, we've been speaking to some of our cities around potential applications on these. So again, there's still time. So we are fast approaching. So we have just under, I guess, 6 weeks, I think, remaining of this particular call. So again, it really is hoped that we will have some applications from Ireland. There is a barring, let's say, on cities that were successful in Call 1 and Call 2. So this is somewhat shrinking the pool of applicants, which will be of aid to our applications from Ireland, hopefully. So really just to talk a little bit about EU capacity building. So these are the 3 cornerstones, let's say, of capacity building. So we have the 2 call types, which are seat-to-seat exchanges and peer reviews, which I'll talk about each in a moment. And then you also have events. So I'll talk too about those. But really, in terms of capacity building, population requirement goes out the window there. You notice previously for innovative actions you must have 50,000, but for capacity building, population isn't the barrier. You still do have to be urban or suburban, or also an Article 11 city, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. What is an Article 11 city? You know, you'll see that kind of also gives us further coverage around the country. But the objectives really, as per capacity building, is to support our cities and towns around sustainable urban development, and in terms of the implementation of strategies, policies, and practice. So what's a seat-to-seat exchange? So this is a call that's open continuously. We've had a number of Irish applicants, you know, and a number already having done their seat-to-seat exchanges. So this has proven to be a popular, very short-term exchange. So again, there's not as much, it's not really about funding, it's about a short-term engagement between a town and city that you have seen elsewhere in Europe that is tackling an urban issue in the way that you would like to learn from. Okay, so you essentially have 1 or 2 cities from a different EU member state, typically 1, and you tap into their expertise. So you go and visit their city, you see how they do things there, specifically around that issue, and they return to your town or city afterwards. The application form is simple. It's been recently updated to make things a little bit simpler, as visits can be implemented quickly. You're talking about between 2 and 5 days, and all visits, the visit to the destination and the return should happen within 5 months typically. So it's open to all cities, again, cities being this EU speak, cities and towns in Ireland, provided again they're the GURBA 1, urban or suburban. So I'll talk a little bit about that again in a moment. Just it was best to talk about eligibility all at once as opposed to the specifics, because it does get a little bit, it does differ a little bit between the different calls. In other words, the innovative actions and the peer reviews and the C2C exchanges. So there's an ongoing call. It's open for whenever you need to apply to it. We'd encourage you to do that because, of course, there's not an an infinite amount of money. It will run out one day, and we'd ask again. We know there is a number being planned again for the autumn from Irish applicants, but again, I'd invite you to reach out to me in the coming days and weeks to talk a little bit more about that. So just in terms of what's available very, very briefly, and this is something similar for peer reviews, so I won't go back into that, but this is the type of support that's available, as I said, for these short-term reviews, these short-term visits. This isn't about a huge piece of money to go and do something with, but this is really to allow you that exchange with a city or town around Europe that would be of interest to you. So in terms of travel, accommodation, subsistence, a daily rate covering staff time, and external stakeholders can participate. So one thing I want to drive home at this is a really great opportunity for local authorities to go on one of these visits with other stakeholders that are not local authority applicants, okay? Not local authority employees. So for example, you could be going to Ljubljana, for example, to see how things are being done there. You could be going with a couple of members of staff from the local authority. You could be going with a member from the Chamber of Commerce. You could be going with somebody from the university. So again, this is an opportunity, as I say, for the most relevant group of stakeholders to be traveling together and to be learning how another city does things in a way that you would like to learn from. So you can see that travel, accommodation, subsistence is the main thing that's returned for the applicant, but for those that are offering a peer, and we have had also an Irish local authority being a peer city as well. So one of the Dublin local authorities was reached out to by Alessandria in Italy around sustainable sustainable tourism. So again, they were the peer city in this case, as opposed to the applicant city. So again, another feature of the C2C exchanges is the ability for the EUI to appoint and pay a moderator to facilitate that exchange and learning process. So that's a really good addition, and we'd always encourage our applicants to avail of that, because this does allow maximum time then and maximum focus, let's say, for the actual exchange itself. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can identify peers later on. Of course, in the first instance, through myself, I'm readily available through my network of contact points all around Europe, again, to find the right match for you. Many come to us already knowing that they've seen something in Finland around housing, they've seen something in Ljubljana around greening, for example. So they come already sometimes with ideas, but if you have the idea that you'd want to learn more about, we can identify the location too. So do reach out to us on that. So in terms of peer reviews, so the call is not currently open. It's envisaged for early October. There was one earlier in the spring. So this is really aimed at helping cities design and improve their sustainable urban development strategies. So this will have different impact depending whereabouts in Europe you are, and of course the different types of government. Local government stronger and weaker in other parts of Europe, and so on and so forth. So, but where the sustainable urban development strategy is based, some towns will have them, some cities will have them, some won't. And this is really around the opportunity to help improve, but also to the design in the first instance. So you can be at any stage of your process around developing a sustainable urban development strategy. Excuse me. So essentially reaching out to up to 6 other towns or cities for you to be peer reviewed by around your sustainable urban development strategy. It's a great opportunity. And one of the main milestones, let's say, in a peer review is the opportunity then for the 3 cities under review with their respective 6 peer reviewers to come together as a group of 18 and to have that cross exchange really of information and expertise. So of course, in the first instance, if you're reaching out for a peer review, you're getting that expertise from others that have already engaged similarly to you in terms of developing a sustainable urban development strategy, but also they themselves find that it's an opportunity to learn as well from others. So you do have that nice exchange among towns and cities, regardless of what stage they're at in their sustainable urban development journey. So it's a process. It's a little bit longer than the city-to-city exchanges. So it goes across several months. It could be 9 to 11 months. But again, it's not, full on. Of course, there'll be big, gaps in between. But this is really a process that, as I said, and you're joined along the journey by your peer reviewers. So again, you can read more about those, but I will be communicating on this as the call opens. And we have the most up-to-date call information. So that's envisaged, as I said, for early October. Typically, the call is very short. I think it was open for only 6 weeks in spring. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit now in a second in the following slide, a little bit about eligibility. So I'm not going to go into all of this here. This is really just summarizing what I've said about the three types of calls, let's say, from the EUI, the European Urban Initiative. So you have innovative actions, as I said, where a lot of the money is targeted. But you've also got peer reviews and CTC exchanges. So both of them are capacity building. So in both cases, again, you have you can avail of the expertise in the case of CTC exchanges and peer reviews to help you along the way. So onto eligibility. So I do have I have written an article. You can see linked at the end of the slide here in the blue at the end. So you can read a little bit more specifically about each of them calls and how they relate to Ireland. But just in a nutshell regarding the eligibility. So it's from Eurostat. The information is given to the, of course, from the member state through to Eurostat, and then of course through to the EUI. And there is an existing correspondence table, as it were. So in Europe they're called local administrative units, but we call them LEAs, local electoral areas. So again, we have 166 in the case of Ireland, and the location from which you're actually applying should be designated as either the GURBA 1, which means urban, or the GURBA 2, which means suburban. So in terms of innovative actions, again, and we'll talk more specifically, I guess, as I already have done with a number of individual interested applicants. But you should be sufficiently urban or suburban. In the case of innovative actions, you have 50,000 people at least in the local authority. So again, most of Ireland, of course, comfortably surpasses that. But also at least 51% should be located in LEAs, local electoral areas that are urban or suburban. Okay. So again, I'll talk specifically about that in terms of eligibility check with individual applicants, but that is let's say the formula for checking that you're eligible for an innovative actions project. So for capacity building activities, so population goes out the window. If you're urban and suburban, again at the LEA level, again you're comfortably able to participate. But also Article 11 cities. So what is an Article 11 city? So each of the three regional assemblies in Ireland, each of the three regions, should I say, has a regional spatial and economic strategy. So therein they have identified their cities, their regional growth centres and their key towns. So they all qualify as Article 11 cities. Okay, they're committed to sustainable urban development. Most of them are already urban or suburban, but there are a few that weren't. So that's a little bit extra coverage. So just on the city exchanges, again, being urban or suburban, fine, very straightforward. Article 11, fine, very straightforward. For peer reviews, Article 11 cities are principally the ones that are being targeted for the review. Okay, so you can be a reviewer as an Article 11 city, but you can also be reviewed. In addition to an Article 11 city, as I said, being urban or suburban, you're particularly invited to be a reviewer. But the aim, I suppose, of the EUI in consultation with the Commission, who is involved in the management of the EUI, I might have said that at the start, or should have said that at the start, The aim, as I said, in this case, is that the target of the peer reviews will be those Article 11 cities across Europe, and it's been an absolute interesting process, should I say, across the member states, trying to collect their Article 11 cities and designate them, and the different ways in which they're designated as well. So we'll hold tight just on the most recent information that will be upcoming soon on the peer review call. But this was how it was done last spring. So you can read a little bit more about that article I wrote there, as I tried to put my thoughts in an even clearer way into that piece there. It's a short article, and if you have any questions, I'll be very, very happy to set up a Teams chat with you anytime. So just a little bit about events. Okay, so we're moving, these are still capacity building, but we're moving a little bit away from the calls, let's say, for a moment. So in addition to the innovative actions and the capacity building, there are a number of capacity building events that the EUI, in consultation with the European Commission, runs across Europe in any given year. So approximately 5 events will happen across Europe in a given year. So these are fairly high level events. They bring together the local authority applicants around a particular theme of interest, okay, but also other key stakeholders, and there's that opportunity to engage. So it's a space for exchange and train and build capacity also, and to basically build this creative kind of growing community, so to speak. So again, it's a geographical scope is very much EU level, but it's a cluster of member states, or it can be country specific. So I'll talk a little bit in a moment about some examples. You can see here, I just had a slight freeze on the computer there, sorry. Okay, you can see examples of some events that happened in 2023. So around Europe, you can see very, very different themes in each case. We will have an event, I can't share too much information at this stage, but there is an event being planned in Ireland in November. So something that the 3 regional assemblies have been working with the EUI and the Commission on, and will be around the new European Bauhaus. So this is particularly around supporting, of course, our local authority applicants in respect of Thrive, the Thrive scheme as well. Of course, the focus there on creative and sustainable reuse of vacant or derelict heritage buildings and public controlled ownership. So this event will be specifically to help our local authority. So more information will follow on that soon. So that's envisaged for Q4. So again, this is something else that's been put on by the EUI in consultation with the Secretariats of the European Commission. I want to talk a little bit about Portico next, and Portico will aid essentially the knowledge capitalization objectives of the European Urban Initiative. So in a nutshell, there will be 3 pillars, essentially: a knowledge hub, urban panorama, and community. So in the case of the knowledge hub, connecting urban practitioners with urban knowledge. Okay, so what's been produced in the past around cohesion policy, and being able to connect that. Also connecting urban practitioners to funding schemes and what's actually out there at the moment around Europe, but also community. So all of these EU programs, and other Interreg programs, this isn't an Interreg program, but also in Interreg programs, you'll see this commitment, let's say, to, of course, capitalizing on work that's already done as well, but connecting groups across Europe as well, and having this, as I said, opportunity to learn from each other. So pertinent really to the most striking, let's say, objective of this process really is to help policymakers and practitioners and support them in evidence-based policymaking and design and implementation of public investments. So principally of interest here is, I want to mention, as I said today, is Portico. And I want to give you one feature, let's say, and I know these pictures are particularly small, but don't worry too much about them. It's really just to explain the purpose of the Urban Matchmaker. And you can see more on the Portico page. So in the previous slide, you'll be able to link through to that too. But you can see the opportunity for you to define an urban challenge you're facing. So you can go on to Portico, you can set up an account. It's very, very straightforward. We have a number of people from Ireland with accounts, of course, including myself as the contact point, but a number have already subscribed. Not in that particular picture on the right hand side of your screen, but there's an opportunity for you to define the challenge you're facing, and then others also may decide to publish their urban solution, and then Portico gives you a match. So it links you with a potential a potential partner or peer around Europe. So this is particularly useful for the city-to-city exchanges, okay? This is a great way for you to find somebody to do a city-to-city exchange with. But it's also a great opportunity for you in the case of innovative actions. You remember I mentioned the transfer partners. Now that comes very much towards the end of the innovative actions project, but it's something that you might think about at the application stages. What other countries, what other cities or towns in other countries might avail or might wish to avail of what you have to offer? So yeah, you can just see a little bit again the description in terms of how this works. Of course, for all of the EUI opportunities and calls, well, for all the EUI calls, you do, of course, need to find partners at some stage. So, yeah. So just a little bit about the urban agenda for the EU, and you'll notice a bit of a style change, let's say, in the slides, and that's very much on purpose. So again, to keep the integrity of the background of the urban agenda for the EU, which is, as I said, connected to the EUI, or the EUI, should I say, is connected to it, but they are separate entities as well. And what this is as I mentioned earlier on, I think back in slide 5, it's an opportunity for informal cooperation at multi-level, multi-stakeholders, so the European Commission, member states, cities, umbrella organisations, to work in tandem, and having identified, I suppose, through the Commission with the help of member states, what are the most pertinent sustainable urban development issues on the ground. So you can see that cities are very much at the core, and there is a video there that I won't be playing now, but you can, it's only a couple of minutes long. You'll be able to see a little bit more about what is the urban agenda for the EU, and to learn what its main purpose is, okay? But in essence, sorry, I was about to play there for me. So in essence, to give you a little bit of the background as well, so you had a few background documents that say a framework behind this. So you had this Pact of Amsterdam, which was around involving urban authorities in the design of policies, and establishing a very much an integrated approach. Then you had the Ljubljana Agreement, I think it was in 2021, reconfirmed this. And then also the Leipzig Charter as well, which is around aligning cohesion policy with sustainable urban development and citywide implementation. So just to look a little bit about how the UAE is implemented. And actually, before I get to that, really just to flag that what the UAEU, the urban agenda for the EU, cares about really is three things, okay? So it wants to have better regulation, so it wants to avoid bottlenecks and minimize administrative burden, which of course is something that we all like to hear. So better implementation of existing policies, legislation, and instruments. It wants to have better funding, so user-friendly sources of funding for urban areas, so traditional sources, but also identifying new ones. And then also the knowledge base, which I've touched upon already, really enhancing knowledge based on urban issues, so exchange of best practices. Okay, so if you just look at this particular piece in front of you here as well, the topics are decided by the member states, as I mentioned, through the Directorate General on Urban Matters. Experts run what's called an ex-ante assessment to define in details the thematic area, and then thematic partnerships are formed, gathering stakeholders. So what is, kind of in a nutshell, a thematic partnership? So again, you have these different level of stakeholders, come together, multi-level, multi-stakeholders coming together, and they're working on essentially an action plan, forming an action plan around a particular topic, okay? So there's a big public consultation piece as part of that as well, engaging the public throughout Europe. So again, you have actors coming together that wouldn't otherwise come together, let's say, in a traditional partnership, and you have an action plan being drafted at the end and implemented by the thematic partnerships. So again, at the end, an action plan and some recommendations. So if you look here, just a little bit about the duration, and I'll give you some examples in a moment. There's 3 years is typically the duration of a thematic partnership, and you have the support of coordinators. So 1 or 2 of the applicants will also be coordinators. They'll help coordinate the event, I suppose, on behalf of all those other actors. So again, we won't go into too much detail about draft action plans implementation. That's very much the process. But I already referred to the pillars around better regulation, funding, knowledge. This is really what the thematic partnerships will work towards, or will address as part of the forming of that action plan as well. And in average, you'll have about 2 in-person meetings and 4 to 6 online meetings per year. working language is in English, and the partnerships are supported administratively by the European Urban Initiative. And you can see what that means there, I suppose, is a thematic partnership officer. So who will, work with the coordinators to work on the day-to-day organising the agenda, travel accommodation support, expertise that will be bought in and paid for, communication and dissemination with the support of the urban contact points as well in the different countries, and also guidance and advice around planning, monitoring, and managing as well. So you can read a little bit more about that. Just to give you a flavour, there's been a couple, nearly a couple of dozen at this stage. But to show you some of them that have happened in the past, so culture and cultural heritage, inclusion of migrants. In fact, Cork City was involved in one on sustainable land use back around between 2016 and 2018, I think. So long before we were involved as contact point. But Dublin City Council as well is involved in a partnership on food, which just began earlier this year, I think. Yeah, it was earlier this year. And the two that have just opened, the two topics have just opened on the 28th of August. So a few days back, you can see the window is fairly short to the 2nd of October, but it's on water sensitive city and building decarbonisation. So again, that has a longer title, as you can see there, around local heating and cooling plans as well. So again, thematically, we won't go into each of those in the same way we didn't go into technology in the cities and energy transition earlier on for the innovative actions, because again, that is in of itself a presentation each. But you can just to flag on this. I want to note to you that there is an opportunity to visit the call page for these. Okay, and you have two documents that say of interest. You have what's called the ex ante assessment, which is quite long. So it's about 80 to 90 pages. So again, what I would advise is that you read what's called a background document, which is 21 pages for either of these. Okay, and it gives you a sense of the type of stakeholders that are being targeted. Of course, gives you an idea of what the partnership aims or hopes, aspires to, let's say, to tackle as part of it. So just also to note that with these, thematic partnerships, there's not really, as I say, classical funding associated with those, as I mentioned, sorry, as I should have mentioned a couple of moments ago, but I did mention the other supports that are available there with the help of the EUI to enable you on that process. And as I said, many local authorities around Europe have found that this UAE thematic partnerships, UAE-EU thematic partnerships have helped them in the next process of actually engaging in an innovative actions project. But of course, they are separate and they're not, one doesn't necessarily lead to the other, or you don't have to do one before the other, but they are really, really good opportunities to engage different levels of stakeholders around Europe, as well as I say, bringing together people that wouldn't ordinarily work together. There is for travel and accommodation, as I said, for the urban and suburban local authorities, provided they're below 500,000, which is in the case of Ireland usually the case. So again, they'll have support again in terms of travel, accommodation, and so on and so forth. I just want to also, before I move past this as well, just kind of referring to some other notes I've made on this. There's actually a thematic partnership seminar tomorrow, or webinar, should I say, at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Irish time, and we'll talk a little bit more about these partnerships. So I will say that the application, despite there being only approximately 5 weeks, maybe, or 6 weeks in total, of 5 weeks of the call, there is an opportunity for you to tackle an application on this. If it's something that you're interested in, do speak to me. It's a fairly straightforward application form, insofar as it's very much a survey based on what they see as being important criteria for your suitability, let's say, in this. So again, you can tackle the application in several rounds, so you can save the work that you've done. And as I said, the background document is of most interest, I think, at this stage. Details, the call, context, the selection criteria, the process, the thematic, as I mentioned a few moments ago, focus, and the types of partners that might be of relevance as well. So if you take just as an example the water sensitive city, the type of partners that might be involved there would be local authorities, NGOs, water authorities, water boards, universities, social economy partners. So that'll look different around Europe, okay? And finally, before moving on, it's worth saying really that these applications will be assessed by the those that kind of produce the ex ante assessments. So they will be reviewing these applications. So again, some of the main things they look at is motivation, expertise on at least one of the sub teams, your ability to outreach to relevant stakeholders, and your readiness to participate. So again, just for time purposes, I realise I'm just to get the URBACT still. So again, won't go into the technicalities, let's say, of each of the calls. We'll discuss in more detail for anyone of interest, anyone that's interested. And as I say, the background document very much gives this information that we're seeing here. So just to give you a flavour of what's been envisaged, let's say, through these. Of course, in the case of the war-sensitive cities, recognising rapid urban growth in European cities has led to significant artificial land cover, with some cities, of course, impacted by increased effects of rainfall runoff, rainwater runoff, and then in the case of building decarbonisation, again, you have also recognizing, of course, the decarbonisation of the building stock, the aim of the European Union and its energy and climate goals as well too. So just a little bit of context on those two. So around to URBACT, so this other program on, for which we're proudly contact point in Ireland. Again, this is something that has had real coverage throughout the land. Continues to be of interest to our local authority, and of course the communities with which they work. So again, it's a European Territorial Cooperation Programme, very much Interreg type, co-funded by the European Regional Development Fund, and again, its promotion of sustainable urban development around Europe. So much smaller budget, you can see, but you can see the impact since 2002. Over 1,000 cities have been linked with 150 networks through URBACT as well. And you can see just some of the themes down here. It's so diverse. Regeneration, one of our current projects, again involved in that space. So again, culture and heritage, digital transition, you name it, and you'll see some of the examples. It's so diverse, as you can imagine. Sustainable urban development, covering lots. A brief note really on beneficiaries. It's of most interest, of course, to us in the first case that we are. All our local authorities are able to avail of URBACT, but you can see around the Europe as well. You have the other member states, you have Switzerland, Norway, and you have also the instrument for pre-accession. So the IPA countries were added, and more recently, only this year, Ukraine and Moldova. Then were also added. So just in terms of the networks, you can read a little bit more about these. So you have, I'll just focus on the first two for a moment. So action planning and transfer networks. So in the case of action planning networks, so what you have is you see transnationally towns and cities, 8 to 10,000 cities around Europe coming together to tackle a common urban challenge together. Okay, so it's something that they want to tackle jointly, and this is what brings them together. So again, in the case of a transfer networks, you see basically a clear already URBACT validated good practice. So URBACT has already validated a number of good practices. I'll talk about that in a moment. And on the back of that, then the owner, let's say, of the good practice gets to impart that upon, say, 5 to 7 other towns and cities. So you're following a clear good practice that you're looking to learn from in the case. So that's the main difference between the action plan networks. You're starting off somewhat at the beginning in the case of an action plan network, looking for that solution together. In the case of the transfer network, you've already identified there is a solution that the lead partner holds, and he or she will be imparting that upon the network again through in a period of exchange. So again, you see each network lasts approximately 2.5 years. The budget is about 850,000 euros divided between the partners again. So it's not about capital. It's about that exchange of learning and good practice. So it helps in terms of staff time, in terms of staff hours. It helps in terms of that travel and accommodation. But also there is expertise given as part of this, and there is monies for small scale testing. So in both cases, the main output, let's say, is an integrated action plan. So again, testing what actions might find their way into your action plan at the end as well. So there is some money available for that. Just a note on innovation transfer networks. So this was very much a new call that we had earlier in the year. So we did have two successful applications from Ireland. There was only 10 networks formed. Two of them have Irish partners, so DCC and also Sandyford Business. The Business Improvement District as well is involved on those two that will begin their activities only next month. So very similar to Action Plan and Transfer Networks, but the main output is an investment plan here. And what actually is being imparted here is pre-existing, let's say, good practice. That was from, you remember earlier on I mentioned the Urban Innovative Actions. So an Urban Innovative Actions project that's now being passed down to willing partners and the formation of an investment plan at the end. So you can see in each case the common thing is the time, budget, and the time, budget, and the time, the budget, and the transnational exchange being very similar across the three. I mentioned a few moments ago the first two networks, the most common, let's say the common output is the integrated action plans. So again, offering towns and cities a concrete response, more localized, let's say, to their urban policy challenge. So an opportunity for them to deliver on an action plan which will be of use to them locally as well. So again, there's an intervention logic, there's a template of support on all of this in terms of getting the integrated action plan together, and you have this expertise that each network will have a lead expert that will guide basically all of the cities and towns along the way in forming their integrated action plan. And most crucially, in terms of from a point of view of sustainability as well, each of the integrated action plans will link into the wider cohesion policy funds so that they're sustainable after the fact, and there's an opportunity to continue. Just a couple of brief slides on the URBACT method. I want to talk about the integrated approach very briefly. So again, member states are different, as I mentioned earlier on. So we have varying levels of local, regional, national, federal governments. But the opportunity to be integrated, so linking the local, in Ireland's case, with the regional, with the national, with the European, and participation in practice as well. So the URBACT local group is such a key feature of URBACT. It's one of its real unique selling points, is its absolute insistence on having the most pertinent local stakeholders coming together to tackle an issue. So we've seen around Ireland, we've seen local residents groups, we've seen tidy towns, we've seen businesses, we've seen the university sector, we've seen them all working closely with our local authorities, depending on what the issue is, who are the most pertinent stakeholders to solving that issue together and bringing them together. So transnational exchange, which I've talked a good bit about as well, the visiting of one another's towns and cities and seeing what they're doing and giving them feedback and vice versa. But also the toolbox. I really want to really stress the toolbox. And even if you're not involved in an URBACT project, the toolbox allows you to access today the resources on how to engage stakeholders, share knowledge. So there's guidance tools, templates, prompts, explainers around funding, integrated and participative actions in our towns and cities as well. So that's an absolute treasure trove of resources that you can use as well. So this is the URBACT method. Very, very brief point on, because I'm kind of running out of time here, on EU City Labs. So again, URBACT and the EUI come together essentially to form what's known as City Labs. So the two that are taking place at the moment is around food and energy transition. So you can see in the case of food, I think we're in number 3, the third in the series, and in energy transition, we're in the second in the series. You can see details on those in Milan and in Bucharest upcoming. And in both of those cases, really, it's around essentially bringing to you and engaging you in knowledge sharing. And again, these are good practices that are EUI and URBACT. And again, seeing how they were adapted and transferred by other cities. So visiting the site itself and seeing how to put in place local projects into your various different national contexts as well. And again, the opportunity to engage with would-be future partners as well. Just a quick note on URBACT coverage in Ireland. So again, this is definitely a map I need to be a little bit better in updating and to doing it a little bit more in a more tidy way. So the original kind of dark blue or navy pieces are let's say the past URBACT, say under URBACT 2 and URBACT 3 programming periods. So you can see some of the towns and cities around Ireland that have benefited. And you can see more recently as well, in terms of the green dots, these were our 7 action planning networks that were announced actually in May of last year, began their journey in June. And so then you can also see the 2 orange crosses, for want of a better word, that again that have seen our exits that have that will begin their journey next month as well. So won't go into detail too much on those, but I do have a brief snapshot, let's say, of some of those projects in action in the moment. But I also want to particularly mention as well the National Practice Transfer Initiative, which was a pilot which saw a good practice imparted in country. Okay, so in this case, Cork City around the playful paradigm was able to impart its good practice on play to a number of towns around Ireland. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, very briefly in each case, because I'm running a little bit out of time. So just to see the coverage, was traditionally very eastern, but it has spread out across the country, and we're continuing to encourage our local authorities that haven't engaged in URBACT yet to really get involved. So just a snapshot of some of the action planning networks in place at the moment. So these began their journey in June last year. So again, you can see biodiversity and green place. Limerick was successful in 2 of these, has a very proud URBACT history as well, and we're really proud of the work they've done in URBACT in the past. And we have Your Impact in Longford as well. So this was around social inclusion, community development. So again, it pre-existing physical regeneration. And again, this is very much bringing together a town team and helping them continue to govern afterwards when the physical regen is over, given that ownership, let's say, back to the town. This is particularly based in Ballymahan. So Cities at Heart in Sligo as well, a very interesting one, led by Paris, really bringing together 10 very diverse European profiles to achieve a balanced and inclusive city. Centre for all users, so gathering relevant indicators and using common methodology. So again, creating a holistic policy framework for lasting and meaningful change. So really reversing the loss of attractiveness of the city centre or the town centre around Europe. And I was at the transnational visit of the partners to Sligo last December, and I think many of the visitors were blown away by how far advanced Sligo was in terms of the metrics that it captures. So very happy for all our local authorities I just mentioned. And eConnecting is based in Ennis and Clare. InfraGreen is based in Navan and Meath. We just want to mention EcoCore very briefly. So it's the first time we have a lead partner in Ireland for URBACT. So this is based in Balbriggan, Fingal. And again, this is seeking to accelerate the green transition and sustainable growth in industrial zones, positioned along transport corridors. You know also about the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, so that's also fitting. That also fits, for Balbriggan along that particular corridor. So I won't go into too much more detail on that because we're out of time almost. But just to mention some of the past, or to give you a snapshot of some of the logos that say of past networks. So tourism friendly cities, Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown, also Rurban in Carlow. So again, this was around managing model of urban gardens in Rome being transferred to other cities and towns. And also interestingly here as well, maps. This was another one of Longford's one in the past as well, military assets as public spaces. So enhancing former military heritage as key elements for sustainable urban development strategy. So the sharing of that space instead of it just being dismissed. So giving it over to for some social utility. And I'm just going to finish up on just mentioning really the piece a moment ago about Cork City and the Playful Paradigm. So again, Cork City was initially a partner of the Playful Paradigm network led by Udine in Italy. It went above and beyond in terms of implementing that practice and of course adopted it for a city. So it was around increasing opportunities for play, and it was modular because you could take on which parts of the practice you preferred at different scales, depending on inclination, resources, capacity, etc. But Cork really took to this very well. Still is very much committed to it today. Having implemented this good practice and surpassed it, it was given the opportunity to transfer its good practice across 5 towns, as you can see there beneath, population ranging from 1663, I think in the case of Rathdrum, Wicklow, to just over 22,000 in the case of Portlaoise. And the initiative lasted, I kind of came into the role very much at the end of this, the last few months, but it was absolutely fascinating to see the different themes that this touched on, of course, between healthy recreation, placemaking, environmental, all those things that it potentially touched. And we went to Pontevedra actually as part of Placemaking Week Europe. Again, there was a workshop there that the guys were involved in as well, and also a play demonstration on the streets of Pontevedra, which I might have shown you, but I didn't here because for time reasons. But also we had this event, the closing event in Sligo, basically in December 2022. We had 65 attendees with people from across Ireland, and we also brought in some international keynotes to speak a little bit about that as well. I'll let you read this in your own time, just some of the testimonials across Europe really of what URBACT is about: plurality of ideas, raising the profile, concrete tools, like I mentioned earlier on. But just to close on the call for transfer networks, in 2025, in springtime, we will have a call for transfer networks. So we have recently had 250 good practices submitted from all around Europe. Ireland submitted 9 of them, good practices, so well above our, let's say, our geographical, accounted for geography and population. We did very well. So 9 of those were submitted from Ireland again. And all of these good practices are potential applications for transfer networks. So Irish towns and cities will be able to see what's validated. I think next month it'll be announced how many of those 250 will be validated, and they will be potential topics for applications and to build partnerships and consortium to learn from those good practices. So hopefully we have some Irish towns and cities leading, but we will also have others that you can subscribe to because you're interested in. In 2026, like the 7 action plan networks I mentioned, there will be another call for action plan networks. And again, I think I've touched already in very long detail on all these. So this is just a summary of the calls, and I really offer you the opportunity, please, to stay in touch. So again, through our Twitter, subscribing to our newsletter as well, and each of the web pages, and just by email as provided at the front of the presentation. I'm really keen to hear from you at any stage. Thank you.
Karl, that was great. Thank you very much. A lot of information to convey in a short period of time. So thank you very much for that. It was really interesting. And I think, sometimes as we know in discussions we've had with this network before, the whole world of EU funding can be quite daunting, even for those who've been working in it a long time. So I think to be able to put a face to a national contact point is really helpful, and know that nationally there is a human being behind these programs who's there to support you in your journey. And I know what Karl is saying there. Definitely do reach out to Karl, and he's there to support you. And yeah, I think even that area around the city to city exchange, that new UA EU, all the acronyms, so UAEU call as well. They're all really interesting, and there's definitely opportunities there for those in local authorities or working with local authorities. So thanks a million for that, Karl. So we have, and you were in really good time as well, so thank you. We have a few questions through, so I'll just scroll down to the end. So the first one, I'll go in order of how your presentations went. So the first one on EUI. So someone was asking, are there any restrictions on the number of innovative action projects that can be submitted per local authority? And have you any tips on ensuring something is truly innovative? So maybe, we hear that term innovative, but what does that actually mean practically? Would be helpful. So thanks, Karl.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Anya. So to answer the first part of that question is there should be just one application per city. So again, I can think of a situation where one of our cities, they're considering, let's say, an application on the two different themes, but ultimately they can only submit one. So there can only be one application per city per call. Okay, so on that piece, regarding the innovation and what's sufficiently innovative, let's say, so the Secretariat really does, and we advise, and we can, of course, as contact points, give our impression on what is innovative. But the Secretariat itself is even reluctant to engage on that, because there is a benchmarking that should happen really in consultation, as opposed with the most relevant partner. So this in this case could be the university sector. Of course, we have huge amounts of expertise within our local authorities in and of themselves, but this benchmarking and seeing what's out there. So what's in existence in the databases of good practices. So looking back at the UIA, the Urban Innovative Actions, seeing what was produced in the past would be a really good start, and seeing if what you're actually talking about producing is actually innovative, is a new. But again, it can be new, but it can also build upon what's been done in the past. But of course, to build upon what's been done in the past, you still need to have a command of what's there. So there are some prompts, just to conclude that particular answer, there are some prompts on the call tree page provided by the Secretary and the Commission, which demonstrates what would be, let's say, an added value under each of those: energy transition and technology in cities. So that's a really good place to start. But yeah, it is a challenge. It is 30%. It's not all of the marks, of course, but it is a challenge to be innovative. But yeah, that is, as I said, a good place to start. Look at what's been done before through the catalogues of good practices, and I'm here to support our cities in that identification.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karl. And just to say, you can still ask questions. So even though I'm in the Q&A portion now, if you want to ask questions, just click into the Q&A and we'll see how many we can get through. So the next one we have now is, am I right in understanding that the European Urban Initiative capacity building opportunities, such as the peer reviews and the exchanges, so the city-to-city exchanges, have wider eligibility across the country compared with the EUI innovative actions?
Yeah, correct. That's correct. So yeah, with the innovative actions, again, the eligibility is, population 50,000 plus, which isn't that hard to achieve, let's say, in a local authority area. But that 51% at least should be in local administrative units or local electoral areas, in our case, that is urban or suburban. So I have an Excel, a correspondence table that I can share with yourselves again, but I can also use to help with anybody's query around whether their local authorities fit that. So on a case-by-case basis, I guess everybody's situation is very specific, but we're using the most recent census data as given to Eurostat and fed through to the secretariats. Regarding capacity building, correct in saying that population is no longer a barrier. But being urban or suburban at the locality is still important. But in addition to that, Article 11 cities, which will include a little bit wider coverage, as I said, our key towns, our regional growth centres, and our cities as identified by the regional, spatial and economic strategies. Again, in the article that I wrote, you can see a link through to those particular tables, the correspondence table, and also the list of Article 11 cities per member state. So again, we collected them in consultation with the managing authorities, in other words, the Southern Regional Assembly and the Northern and Western Regional Assembly and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. We got those Article 11 cities collected. So they're there for people to look at. But again, perhaps it's easier just to reach out in a direct email to me and I'll be able to give a really a quick answer on that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karl. So the next one is, in terms of the city-to-city exchanges, can non-local authority employees participate, travel as part of these? So yeah, I know we have it's mostly local authorities in today's meeting, but there are a few from non-local authorities. So yeah, are they eligible to participate?
Yeah, they are, and they're very much encouraged. They're very much encouraged as well. So the applicant will be the local authority, and let's say the lump sum will be returned to the local authority, but the travel accommodation subsistence for up to 4 people in the case of the C2C exchanges will be given. And again, if the local authority could be the applicant, but it's very much expected and envisaged that will also, the consortium, the 4 people that go, they could all be local authority staff, but ultimately if the local authority has those links with their local stakeholders, business, universities, residents groups, again, they could be part of it as well, because this is really about maximizing, let's say, the exchange itself. So again, having 4 people is a really good opportunity then, that you're not going back as one person and saying everything that happened, but there's those, you 4 times the opportunity, let's say, on the trip to take in information and to engage and to network as well. So absolutely, this is a local authority applicant process, but again, it does enable others to join.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karl. The next one is about the UA-EU. What are the benefits or the main benefits of being part of a UA-EU thematic partnership?
So the main benefits really are that you will work with stakeholders that you might not otherwise work with. So again, many of these other existing kind of partnerships and EU projects might not ordinarily bring, for example, the Commission in close proximity to a city, to a national government. You have some regional governments, for example, working across partnerships that might not otherwise work together. So there's the opportunity there to engage and to learn from one another at those different levels. So multi-level, multi-stakeholder, but also the opportunity to form an action plan at the end with recommendations, and just to be able to feed in, quite frankly, to national and EU policy. This is really, really a great opportunity to do that, and it can enable you, I suppose, and increase your ability then to tackle some of the major EU funds, like an innovative actions project, for example. It'll be really advantageous to have been engaged in a thematic partnership and then to go on to tackle in innovative actions. But there's just some of the benefits. Yeah, ultimately, network and engagement is some of the most important aspects, I think, of a thematic partnership.
Brilliant. And did you mention, is it tomorrow morning that the webinar for you, and who's that being facilitated by, or is there a link for that?
Yeah, so the Urban Agenda for the EU will host that tomorrow morning at 9 to 11. So again, if I didn't already provide that link, I will give that to you. Actually, I'd be able to take it from here if I haven't already. Sorry, I thought I had given that over.
You could have. Maybe I missed it. Don't worry.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's useful while I'm here to do that. So yeah, it's always when you want to find it, you won't.
Sure, we can send it on at the end as well, Karl.
I can send it to you on afterwards, and yeah, because that's tomorrow morning, 9 to 11. I suspect they might record it, but I can't. I'm not entirely sure. So that's tomorrow morning from 9 to 11 Irish time. So it's advertised as 10 to 12 for low European time, but that's 9 to 11 in our case. Yeah, that's tomorrow. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And then just the last question we might address for today, and we can follow up with any additional ones. So this one is about the URBACT local group. Could you just say again who is involved in these groups?
Yeah. So in terms of URBACT local groups, so again, you'll have, if I think of some examples around Ireland, so I sometimes visit the URBACT local groups, and they're happening. So I was recently at one in Fingal, in Balbriggan, more specifically, and I visited one then in Sligo recently. So in both cases, of course, they'll be different depending on what the team is. The team, as in what is the let's say the team behind the what is the topic, should I say, of the project. But you typically have local authority staff. You'll have sometimes elected members will be part of them. You'll have local businesses. You'll have maybe the university sector. You'll have civil society. You will have your residents associations. As I said, tidy towns around Ireland have played a huge part in URBACT local groups as well, really giving that local buy-in and the permanency really that you have with residents that you don't necessarily have for all them other groups, particularly local authority staff that sometimes change. So again, it will differ, as I said, depending on the team behind or the topic behind the project, but they're typically some of the most prominent stakeholders you'll find. I know at one of the URBACT local groups recently, we were talking about bringing some voices from the private sector in as well, because this was around again, like I suppose a town centre. So again, just to have some other ideas. So yeah, it varies, but again, it's really about that ongoing kind of checking that you have the right voices at the table, and that can change. So as I said, as the project progresses as well, you might find that there's a missing voice at the table, and that's kind of my role as well when I go on these visits as well, to suggest, perhaps you could have this voice in the room, or you could have. So, but again, I have to say our local authorities are really doing genuinely a smashing job at the moment in those projects. So again, they're really active and very very full URBACT local groups in terms of the voices around the table. So it's great to see.
That's fantastic, Karl. So look, thanks so much for that, Karl. And if there is any additional questions that people have when they maybe review the slides or review the recording, do follow up with ourselves and we can link you in with Karl, or you can link in directly with Karl as well. I know he'd be delighted to chat to you. So I'll just move on now just to thank the members of the ETC network for your continued engagement as always. It's been lovely to interact with a lot of you over the last year. And those of you who are not members of the ETC network, you can scan the QR code on your screen now to join. And my colleague Lorraine, who's been great putting all the links in the chat throughout this meeting, Lorraine is going to pop a link in the chat now if you would like to join the ETC network. And I'd just like to, before I move on to the next one, just again to thank Karl for taking the time out of his day today. We really, really appreciate it, Karl. And I think it'll definitely be of interest to our attendees today. And before we close the webinar, we're in good time. I'd just like to invite now my colleague, Sarah Davrin, who is the national contact point for Interreg Northwest Europe. So a lot of you will be familiar with Sarah. Sarah is going to let you know about an upcoming information webinar for Interreg Northwest Europe, so call 5 under that programme. There is a QR code again if you would like to register for that webinar, and Lorraine is going to pop a link in the chat as well. So Sarah, you might just quickly let us know who the target audience is for the webinar and a bit about what people can expect through that webinar.
Perfect, yeah. So look, I won't keep you. It's a 1-hour webinar similar to today. Thank you, Karl. Very interesting from the URBACT side. There's often with these Interregs synergies that can be done. So projects that might have finished with the URBACT funding might be interested in scaling up to other countries, and they could look at Interreg Northwest Europe type of funding. So please feel free to join us on Thursday the 19th. If you have a project idea in mind, you can ask for a one-to-one session. You just drop an email to me. And the email and all that information is available at the registration website that Lorraine has kindly put in the chat. I also wanted to highlight that we also have an event coming up in Croke Park in November, which can be interesting for all types of stakeholders, also relevant for this kind of synergy approach with other EU and Interreg funds such as URBACT. Quite interesting for the target group of local authorities, so please also feel free to register there. The day one will be more focused on projects and applications to the new call. Deadline is in January. And day 2 will be a lot around how can the future of EU cohesion policy and where this kind of regional development funding money is to be dedicated to have your say as a stakeholder consultations. That could be interesting, 5th and 6th of November. And Lorraine, I sent an email to you with the link for that. I might drop it in the chat. Anyway, thank you, Anya and Karl, for letting me have the say there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Sarah. And look, we'll be in contact with our members. We're hoping to have future events as well before the end of the year. And with that, I'll close the webinar. Thanks again to Karl, thanks to Lorraine, thanks to Lisa, and thanks to Sarah, and wishing you a great remainder of your week. So thank you very much all. Bye for now.